Hello and welcome back to the Franchise Growth Pod. This is Belle, Director of Marketing here at AC Inc. And today we have a bit of a different guest. I haven't had you on the podcast in a while. Welcome to Stephen, the president here at AC. How's it going, Stephen?
Is going well, thank you. Recovering after a busy couple of weeks of conferencing and travel.
So much travel, so much conferencing. A little bit crazy, actually. Yeah, so this is coming out on November 7th, the first week of November, and you just came back from, wait, let's see if I can even get these straight. You went to FBR Summit 2 weeks ago, and then last week you were at EFC, and then a few weeks before that you were at Springboard. Is that all of them?
Yes, that is correct. It's three conferences in 5 weeks. Been fun.
Pretty crazy. And the two in 2 weeks, that must be like that must be a task to do the two in 2 weeks.
Yeah, I think it's, coming from the beautiful west coast of Canada, it takes a couple more flights to get places. So I think we're about 12 planes over the last 2 weeks.
That's insanity. And how do you find the plane flying? Like, have you been doing much work on planes? Has the Wi-Fi been okay, or has it been like napping on planes? What's the plane vibe been?
As much as I, can complain about the tiring element of traveling, I do my best work on travel days because I literally get into the plane, no one can contact me, no one can reach me, don't have to have calls. I can literally just log in and lock into whatever music, and then I just get through all of the tasks that have been procrastinating on for the month.
That's true, actually. And I know some people are really like that. Like they're big work on plane people. I'm trying to think if I've been a big work on plane person. I haven't taken really long flights in a while. Maybe you have to be in a bit of I'm doing like a lot of the hour flights recently. And like you can't really get a ton done on those. Like you're kind of only in the actual air for like 20 minutes. Then you're like
Yeah.
coming back down again. But those longer flights, those are great for getting some emails done or getting some strategies mapped out and stuff like that is awesome. We're so glad you're back. I know the Easy team is stoked to have both you and Angela have been gone for a bunch of weeks, and we've been holding down the fort, but we're excited to have the whole team kind of all settled, which is super fun, and working on some things for the new year, which is great. And We have some really exciting news. We're going to be talking today all about not something brand new. It's something that we've been doing for probably about half the year this year, but it is something really exciting because I remember you and I talked about the field coach assessment, which is what we're going to be getting into today, all about assessing your field coaching team, assessing your strategies, assessing the training and development needed to optimize your field coaches. But you and I actually talked about this, about the development of this project like way back in the beginning of this year on the podcast. So it's kind of fun to be back on the pod with you talking about now that it's actually out in the world and our partner Zorakle. We're going to talk about what that looks like, putting it together with them. So we're going to dive into all the details, but it is really fun coming full circle on one of these projects. Like, because we mentioned it, I think just briefly on a podcast way at the beginning of the year. So pretty fun there. I almost forgot actually, as we were hopping on today's podcast, that I have been starting all of these episodes. And I don't know, Stephen, if you've been on the new season, so I'm not sure if you've done it yet, but we open all the episodes with an icebreaker. So it's just a random question. As you know, Angela loves her icebreakers, loves a random question. We love doing them at conferences, at events, on roundtables. And so we brought them onto the podcast as well, because you might as well.
Okay.
Are you ready for your icebreaker question?
I'm ready.
This is a little bit of a gimme because I already knew this about you, but what is your favorite sport to watch on TV? Not live, TV.
That's going to be a tough one because I think you're all in on me saying NFL.
Mhm.
But I am born and bred Wolverhampton, United Kingdom, and my parents' backyard backs onto the Wolves training ground, English Premier League soccer team. So I do think that as much as I love my fantasy football and my Sunday football days, I don't think I've missed a kick of a Wolves game on TV in the 12 years that I've been outside of the UK.
That's really sweet. I didn't think you were going to say that one. I definitely thought you were going to say NFL because your Sunday NFL afternoons are of course infamous. But that's a great answer. And I didn't realize your parents live so close to the training grounds. That's kind of
Yeah,
cool.
it's a very close second NFL, but no, I love my Wolves.
Is it because you're losing fantasy football right now? Would that be why?
In one league, I'm winning in two other leagues.
Okay, well, that's a great answer. I actually didn't know that. So that's really sweet. Okay, so done with the icebreaker. Now we're going to dive right in because we actually have so much to talk about this field coach assessment. So just as some background, I'm going to give the background just because I'm going to talk really fast and we'll get it out of the way. If anyone is a religious listener of the podcast, you probably did hear us talk about this way back in the beginning of 2023, different season of the podcast entirely. But we talked about how we were really seeing this need for creating a benchmark for field coaching in the industry. So up until, and this is actually Steven's line, I stole it for our landing page. So if you go check it out on our website, this is Steven's line. He always has said it in this way where he goes, field coaching and like creating a standard for training and what field coaches, like what their behaviors and their personalities and the training that's needed to get them to be impactful in a system. It kind of has just been the Wild West, like up until this year, really, which is when we decided we wanted to create a benchmark and actually use data from real field coaches, like real top performers in their systems, and create this benchmark of the types of behavioral characteristics is kind of what we call it, of a field coach and how they can be effective in a system, what the levels of the different types of personality traits would be, and all of that kind of stuff. And we partnered with Zorakle way back in the beginning of this year to help create that. So Zorakle profiles, again, just giving all the background before we hop into all the nitty gritty good stuff. Zorakle profiles, they are behavioral characteristic specialists. They're like science backed, data backed, and they create assessments for all different types of the franchise industry. So they do things for like franchise development, like candidate vetting, assessments in that space. They do it for like hiring, for connecting candidates and brands. So seeing kind of the different behaviors and characteristics that you want to see in different candidates. And we took all of that science that they are so awesome at and applied it to field coaching for the first time ever. So super exciting. And Stephen, you just got to share the news at a couple of these events recently that it's officially here. The benchmark is here. People can use it, whether they use it as kind of a first step to getting some training and development put in place for their coaches or to help hire a new coach. So it can be used in all these different ways. But you just got to talk about it at a lot of these events. And how are you feeling after getting to finally kind of share the exciting news after working on it all this year? How has that been going?
Yeah, it's been very validating. I think as suppliers in the franchise industry, and we're one of just as a side note, I meet with suppliers all the time at these different events, and I think in franchising more so than any other industry, um, suppliers truly are coming up with solutions to problems. It's not just, hey, we have this product and we can make it fit franchising. It's people who understand the industry, have lots of conversations, and hear similar pain points coming up. And so I do think more so than any other industry I've been involved in, suppliers are out there really truly trying to come up with problems to pain points and challenges. And so we've been developing this over 2023, and going out there and being able to talk to franchisors and VP of Ops and leadership teams in general. The reception has been fantastic. People really want to get a finger on the pulse of, who do they have in their roles? How can they better support those people? Um, a lot of times field support teams, particularly in more emerging brands, a lot of times those people have sort of, I guess, fallen into that role. Maybe they have been former franchisees or current franchisees that were, high achievers, top performers. Maybe they're veterans of the industry. So maybe, let's say it's a home service concept. Maybe they've been in that trade for 25 years, so they know how to actually do the operations of the concept well. Um, but very rarely, are people going out there and vetting people for their ability to coach, their ability to lead, their ability to motivate franchisees. And I think one of the biggest parts of this is raising awareness that there's sort of some of the key criteria to look for.
Totally, totally. And that brings us right into kind of my first question, which is I think a lot of times and I've had even some, fair amount of conversations as we've been building out even the new page that's talking about the assessment and some of our our assets and decks and stuff. So as we've been kind of going through it, a big misconception I think that is that it just to like vet people, right? If you're a field coach, it's just to say like, hey, are you good at your job? Like it's kind of being used in that way. But as you just mentioned, I'll get you to kind of describe a few of the ways that brands are actually like strategically looking at using a tool like this in different ways. Because it's not just, it's not just to say like, is this person good at their job? That's not what, and I know assessment can sometimes fall into that category. Or, another misconception we're seeing is that people think it's just, a personality quiz, like plug in some answers and it's just going to whip out a sheet of things. Here's the things that you meet 60% of this and 40% of this or whatever. It's just going to spit out this little list, and that's kind of all you're getting. But do you want to kind of address, like how people are using it, and then what the process looks like that might be a little bit different than people are expecting, and that maybe benefits like how people are using it? I think would be good for people to hear.
Yeah, I mean, I think to touch on one of the first things you said, there is, all about how you present it. I think the culture of your system is going to dictate how you use it. I'm a firm believer, and at AC Inc, we're firm believers that every person in your organization should have some form of a scorecard, some form of being evaluated on how they're performing, all the way up to the CEO. Like it doesn't change for different roles. And so, we evaluate the franchisees on certain criteria. We evaluate um, marketing teams, sales teams, fran dev, where everybody's got a way of being evaluated. And so really, just to evaluate the field coaches, hopefully we already have a culture within the system that the field coaches are like, this is fantastic. I want to know how I can improve. I want to know where my blind spots are. And if you're listening to this and you're like, that would not land at all, then that's also an opportunity to look at, how to find, the how to integrate assessment to actually help drive the company forward and help drive the department forward. So that's the first thing I wanted to just mention. Is it's definitely not a you're good or you're bad. It's like, these are your strengths. These are areas that we see other field support people that have and we'll get into a little bit about how we develop this, but rock stars, A players, top performing field support teams across the industry, these are the common characteristics that they all have. And these are opportunities. You're right in the Goldilocks zone on all of these areas, but potentially in some of these areas, we could look at doing a bit more focused professional development, or maybe as a franchisor, we can support you a little bit better in those areas.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. I've also never heard the term Goldilocks zone. I love that as well. Yeah, and I want to say that being a key takeaway too of one of the reasons we wanted to develop this, but also I love what you said about I love the specifics of if you're thinking about presenting an opportunity for someone to learn their strengths and weaknesses and how to improve in their role. If you're thinking about that and your field coach team, and you're not thinking that that would be met with like excitement or eagerness, or oh my gosh, I would love to know some areas that I could be improving on, so I could be even better at what I'm doing, or I could find courses or education or development or resources that are going to help me. If you're noticing like already, ooh, there would be hard like major pushback on something like that, I love that that's an immediate takeaway in itself. Like even
Exactly.
that as a leader, that's immediately something where you go, that's a red flag anyways. Even if we don't do something like this, the idea of bringing that to your team and having that not met with some kind of interest or excitement, I love that that's already something people can take, oh, okay, so how are we not creating that amongst our team and our company, and how can we kind of revert that into being some more excitement and some more eagerness around improvement and growth and development and all those things. So I just thought that was a really, really good key takeaway. But I'll let you continue talking just about like how people kind of are using it. I love how it's, yeah, again, based on culture, but some of the ways it can be used, and some of the ways the process, of how the assessment kind of works kind of lends itself to being used in different ways would be great.
Yeah, so the two main ways that this is being used right now is to evaluate current field support teams. And so just to clarify, when I'm saying field support, this could be field coaches who are deliver, or franchise business consultants who are really focused on the proactive growth coaching side, the success business side. Also those who are on the technical side and more of the compliance field visit side. Also, but really anybody that's having, you know, a main part of their role in the organization being interacting with franchisees. And for any more emerging brands listening to this, we know that you may not have, you know, comprehensive field support teams. It might just be you wearing all the hats, or maybe one or two of your colleagues who are doing this. So we really just have to think about putting the hat on of, I'm working with franchisees, and these are the traits that we see get the most amount of success out of those franchise partners. The second way, obviously, is once we've evaluated the team, we now can actually start looking internally of building, you know, your own custom bespoke. What's a top performing field coach look like in your system? And then that can then be used in the recruitment process. So, okay, we need to go and hire three or four more coaches. Now they get to go and look at doing this assessment. How well do they match up to the top performing coaches we've already got in the system? And so now you can start looking at that, or maybe filling out some of the gaps if someone's got stronger areas than others. It really allows you to use data to build out your field support team. And that has been the two main ways that we're seeing people really interested. I just got off a call this morning with a Canadian-based system, 200 franchisees, eight field coaches, and you know, his whole focus is looking at being able to invest in his people and improve their skills. But you know, he quite transparently admitted, you know, it's really just based on his opinion of where he's seeing some of the gaps. This is one of the first times that we can use data to direct where we're putting in our time and effort, because we may feel as leaders that, oh, you know, they definitely need to have more strength in this area, but maybe where they're at is actually in that Goldilocks zone, and we don't need to, you know, we're not going to get the best bang for our buck trying to improve those areas. We actually need to lift up some of the areas where they're falling short so that they're more well balanced. And that's where we're starting to see a lot of interest.
That's so cool. Yeah, I love that it's being used on the hiring and the development side, because I think, yeah, especially as a larger system, if you're looking at expanding your team, being able to have that customized evaluation that you can use on the candidate level is so cool. And again, something that just, it hasn't been available in this space in franchising up until this point. So I do still want to dive a little bit into the process, and again, it not just being something where you like type in some results and then you get printed off this thing, right? So it's not that type of, sorry. So it's not that type of process. So I do want to make sure we have time to talk about that as well, because I think that has been an interesting question we've gotten a couple times about like what the process looks like. But I also want to talk about how we built this, because I think that lends itself to why the process is the way it is. So when we put this into development, like when we were thinking about, okay, we want to build out this benchmark, we want to gather data from real top performers, we want to use that as this industry standard, we want to then help more brands kind of be collecting this information and vetting themselves against this industry standard. What does that process look like? And maybe even talk a bit about how Zorakle profiles has kind of played into like their expertise in the actual assessment building space has been incredible. Do you want to talk a bit about that? Because I think that does lend itself to why it is like more of a, it's a bit more of an in-depth process than just, you know, typing in some results and getting printed out this like, here's where you stand. It's not quite like that. And there's a reason for that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, first of all, big shout out to our friends at Zoracle. There's lots of people to mention over there, but I'll focus on Rebecca Monet, who's the CEO and chief scientist over there. And back sort of beginning of Q2 of this year, Rebecca and I were having a lot of calls together and sort of coming up with this process. And so what we first wanted to do was go out and um, survey the people that we know in the community, our fantastic members, our community, and look at their field coach teams. So there was an initial sort of inclusion exclusion criteria to look at. I mean, it had things such as time in the role, proven track record of moving the needle with franchisees, franchisee satisfaction scores of the said coaches. So there was a whole sort of comprehensive inclusion exclusion criteria. Then there was a proprietary standardizing process where we were looking at, okay, based on further exploration, who are A players, who are B and C players. And then we were able to put them through the Zorakle assessment tool, and we're able to develop benchmark data that supported the A players. And as Rebecca will say, if you're looking at this at the franchisee level using the tool, the difference of 2 to 3% on some of these measures between an A and a B could result in a difference of 60 to $100,000 at the unit level in gross revenue. Well, we were finding between A and B players at the field coach level differences of 20 to 30%. And if you think that that person has an influence over 20 to 50 franchisees, for instance, and that if you have somebody who is maybe an average performing field coach and a top performer, that could have a massive effect to your bottom line as a franchisor and a massive effect to the success and engagement and happiness of that franchisee, of that small business owner who's bought into your system. So it was really, I think once Rebecca and our team saw the data, we were like, wow, we had a kind of a hypothesis to that point that there would be differences. The data really, really supported that. And so at that point, we were able to then start looking at benchmarking, and then it changes. It changes based on the size of your system. So as an example, if you are a emerging brand, let's say you've got 20, 30 locations and you're looking at bringing in a field coach into that role.
Yeah.
That field coach is, there first of all, that company's at a stage of growth that we would consider sort of stage 1, stage 2 growth company. And at that level, that field coach probably needs to be a little bit more entrepreneurial because they're going to be in a big create mode. They're going to help build the processes and the SOPs, and they're going to start looking at the framework, and they're maybe going to be more of an extension of your leadership team trying to figure a lot of this stuff out. If you've got 2,000 locations and you've got 100 field coaches, and we're now thinking about it that way, those people probably need to be more as we would class there as a sort of a stage 3, stage 4 company, and it's more plug and play. We want these people to be really, really, really good coaches and be able to deliver the framework and the systems that have been put in place. So it then started getting quite technical where we have to look at, okay, so we've got this overall benchmark, but now we need to determine what the benchmark looks like for early stage growth, latter stage growth, and then also the key demands of the system. So some systems are very sales focused, some are very marketing heavy, some are very, very technical. And therefore, if we're expecting those things of the franchisee, the field coach demands are going to be slightly different as well. So it's definitely not a plug and play. There's definitely very, very personalized interpretation where Zorakle and us will sit down with the franchisor and we'll start looking at the demands of your system, where you're looking to go, and how these results can help you in the development of your team.
Wow. Yeah, that was perfectly put, Stephen. I feel like I've learned a lot too, and I already knew a lot of those details, to be honest. But I think what you did too is you really helped describe, like, if we're talking about how this is going to impact your system, you've touched on so many things already. Like, if we're thinking about how evaluating this role and how assessing this type of role is going to make an impact on your bottom line, on your franchisee life cycle, on their happiness and engagement in the brand, all of these pieces, and how no field coach, even though there is a benchmark, like an overall benchmark of here's where, in general, someone would sit on like an entrepreneurial scale, or on a technical scale, or on a, personable or friendly, right? All these different levels. There is kind of a general, but as you said, the reason why this process is not just a type in your results to answers to a question and then get spit out this little report thing. The reason there is more of an actual interpretation stage and sitting down and customizing these results based on well, what does your system need? How big is your system? All these different things. I think that is a really great example as to how a benchmark and how this type of, benchmark evaluation stuff, all this technical stuff can actually become so operations focused and so like implemented in your system on a deeper level, where it actually makes this huge difference, not only in hiring new coaches, but also, yeah, providing like the right training so that your existing field coaches are going, oh, I'm actually really needing to improve this thing, or I need to become better at this in my sessions, and here's how we're going to work on that and hold you accountable to those steps and all of that. So I just thought that was really great description, and it makes me kind of even more excited that we get to be bringing this to more brands now, and that people even know that this type of thing and this type of evaluation process is such a key part of any business, but specifically this role, where we're really starting to see how that plays out in a system itself. So I think we've touched on a lot. Is there anything else you'd wanna mention before we finish up? Just overall about the assessment, assessing field coaches, evaluating them, bringing it to your team, anything along those lines before we finish up here.
There's a few elements. I mean, first of all, this assessment is 100% better than anything else that exists out there, because nothing else exists out there in this that is specialized in this area. But I'm not going to sit here and say that the data is completely perfect in every single way. This is the beginning of a process where now we're in a continual state of collecting more data, adding to the strength of the data, weeding out the outliers and the anomalies, and we're trying to get this to a point where it's going to be very, very easy for us to go into a system and say, okay, you're a QSR, you're a home service, you're in this stage of growth. This is what the framework looks like. And this is, based on what we're seeing, this is what you're going to want the profile and the behavioral characteristics of your field support to look like. Right now, we're just continuing to stress test the data and keep building that, because it's a process. I mean, eventually we want thousands of sets of data leading into this. So that'd be the first sort of disclaimer. It's a great start. It's intended to really help guide and add to what potentially the leadership team's internal thought process might already be about their team, and to add a little bit of data validation behind that. And then just as a last note, it's just really thinking about some of, because we've talked about that it's an assessment, we've talked about behavioral characteristics, but we haven't really given anybody any examples of what those characteristics might be and why they may be important. So one example that I like to just use, because I think it's quite easy to visualize and digest, is one of the readings on the assessment will look at the behavioral values of the coach, and one of those would be the societal measure. And the societal measure is a field coach's ability to build rapport with a franchisee. And so immediately everyone's like, well, that should probably be high. And this is where it was really interesting learning from the data that, and this is where that Goldilocks zone comes back again, is that yes, there needs to be a good amount of a societal measure, but actually too much can be just as detrimental as too little. So if we're on the lower end of a societal score, the field coach is really going to struggle to build a rapport, and you guys probably aren't even going to get the ball rolling, because that relationship has not been built. However, if we're too high on that societal score, and we found this a lot in the B and C player groups, we saw this a lot where the franchisee actually loves their field coach. They're like, my field coach is great. I love them. They're fantastic. I love every time we chat. However, the field coach was not necessarily getting the most out or the best out of that franchisee. And what we were finding is that when you've got too high of a societal measure, you're valuing that relationship more than, or you've evaluated that relationship so much that to hold that person accountable and to be assertive with that person becomes more and more challenging, because you don't want to ruin that friendship and that relationship.
Yeah, or
And
to
so,
have like tougher conversations or, have to kind of address like, hey, this is something that has been left off, it hasn't been taken action on in, weeks at this point, and we need to kind of sit down and think about why you aren't taking some of these steps or why haven't but having those types of conversations, I love that you brought up an actual example of this too. And we talked about entrepreneurial versus like we talked a bit about that in some of the other examples, but this one, you're right, is such a good one because and it's so interesting that if it's so high and they just love being buddies and it's like you don't have a lot of those tough conversations or challenging moments of like let's push this to the next level, that can actually be a danger as well in terms of becoming just like kind of buds as opposed to actually helping them become better in their business and see results and help change sometimes their entire life by challenging them and all of that as well. I think that's such a good
yeah,
example.
exactly. And in that scenario, I mean, we have people on our team who have high societal, and again, this doesn't mean good or bad, but once you're aware of it, I think that whole if you can name it, you can tame it. Now you can enter into those conversations with the new franchisees, and you can have those boundaries that you need to set because you know that you have uh, uh, a pattern of really diving into the relationship, and now you can kind of pull back on there. And so that's where sort of these results really help us be able to guide brands on how to set up their teams.
Amazing, amazing. That's such a great way to finish off is a solid, tangible example like that, and just kind of getting people to even understand. And as you said, some people even have some kind of evaluation just in general for their home office. And this is like such a benefit because it adds to it, gets more specific into their role and all of that as well. So great example to finish off with. And if anyone is interested, I know this was a very technical podcast compared to some of our other ones, but it is fun to get into the nitty gritty sometimes, especially for people who are looking for more of that, like, well, what's the actual information that we're going to be getting through a process like that. But I was going to mention, I think we are planning for in the next couple months, we're going to be putting together a webinar that's going to go into some of the things we've learned through the past year of us developing this and gathering a lot of this data from industry top performers and different brands we've done this process with, so that you can actually hop on, learn a bit about again some of the different characteristics to be looking for, the kind of difference between the standard characteristics versus why a different stage of growth brand might be different. So we're going to actually be doing a cool educational session all about that in the next few months. So I just did want to finish up that if you are interested, always head to our email list. You can join the email list by heading to our website, fieldcoachexperts.com. We always make sure our email list gets all the first updates on all the awesome stuff coming up, but that's an exciting one that'll be really fun to talk about even more as we develop even more of this benchmark. Thank you so much, Stephen, for your time. As always, it is so fun to chat, and this was such a great episode. And go be awesome.
Or don't be shitty.
Or don't be shitty. See you guys.